Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us. This is our third C-Suite Coach Chat with the New York Urban League this year, and I'm really excited that they have partnered with us to have these exciting conversations. We always have these conversations moderated by someone amazing like Sandra Garcia, who wears many hats, one of them also being she is a C-Suite coach as well on our team. And we pair a C-Suite coach with an industry executive. Today, you have the pleasure of also having an industry executive who has a coaching background as well. And the purpose is to talk about the important topics that matter to professionals. And today we'll be talking about goal setting, why it's so important, and how working with an executive coach can help. Quickly, I just want to let you know that C-Suite Coach has over 25 certified executive coaches of color. And if you're looking to connect with a coach or you're looking for coaches and training for your organization, we are the partner for you. And so you'll get an opportunity to hear from our amazing coach and also, I'm glad to say, one of our amazing clients. So thank you all so much for being here. And without further ado, I'll kick it back over to Sandra so we can begin the great conversation.
All right, thank you. So today, my primary hat and role is as the D&I lab manager for the New York Urban League. As the D&I lab manager, we have several brands, 13 to be exact, who have made an outward commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also support an online platform, which we have and which we are going to invite all of you to be a part of, NYULConnect.org. NYUL Connect is an online community, an online destination for connections. First and foremost, on the platform, you can also be connected to a mentor. Most importantly, you can connect with all the activity happening at the New York Urban League from a career seeker perspective or just a connection seeker perspective. All right, so we have Mike Thompson, who is a passionate professional development expert. And I was reading up on you, Mike. I was like, wow, okay, lots going on here. Committed to helping leaders access, discover, and exploit their unique talents and gifts in ways that enhance their capabilities and achieve their goals. We're going to learn a little bit more about Mike as we dive into conversation, so I won't give too much more about his bio. Andrea is a global DEI practitioner and leadership coach with over 12 years of experience in both the corporate and nonprofit sectors. After 4 years of recruiting for various companies and almost 7 years at Northwell Health, leading workforce ED&I initiatives, she joined the global DEI team at Warner Music Group, where she currently oversees DEI Learning and Development. So Andrea, thank you. And Mike, thank you for making the time to be here today. So Mike, we are going to start with you. So you do have an extensive background in professional development. What are the key elements that you believe are essential for setting realistic yet ambitious goals within an organization? And we do know that we are approaching the end of the year. This is a time where we evaluate where we are and also begin to think about what do we want for ourselves in the new year. So how do we set realistic yet ambitious goals?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And hello, everybody. By the way, I am in Los Angeles. I don't know if there are any West Coasters out here, but if you are, just barely afternoon. Anyway, so a couple of things I would just share on that question, Sonia. So first and foremost, if you're in an organization, at the very least, the goal should be, and I could use the word cascaded. In other words, that they shouldn't be goals in a vacuum around what you want to achieve, but they should be aligned with the organization. And in most organizations of any size, the goals are set at the corporate top, and then they filter down to different functions, departments, teams, and individuals. So first and foremost, I would always encourage folks to make sure that their goals are aligned. Having goals that are connected to the function and department goals will give you that visibility that you need to make sure that people are aware of the work that you're doing. The other thing I think that's important is to really be honest and accurate with yourself and your strengths. I always like to encourage people to do a thorough self-assessment and really take a look at two things. What are their strengths? And when I talk about strength, I talk about things that you can intentionally leverage to help you achieve those goals. And then hopefully you can hold me to this promise I like to make during this time together. Other than what I'll say now, I don't like to use the word weakness. I think it's an inappropriate word to use in organizations, and particularly ineffective when it comes to goal setting. I would like to stress opportunities for development. I think it just helps you frame your goals in a different way when you look at it that way. There, I think it's important to look at, what are the gaps? What are the things that you want to focus on that will help leverage your visibility in the organization? Also, make sure that you get the kind of exposure you want when it comes to achieving those goals, and you get the publicity and notoriety that comes with that. Starting with an honest and accurate self-assessment of who I am, what am I really good at, what are my strengths, and where are the areas of development where, if I can close that gap, I'm going to get the biggest bang for my buck, the biggest traction in the organization that's going to enhance my not only success and performance on the job, but also hopefully my visibility, my opportunity to be seen in the organization and to make the kind of contribution that will be impactful to both the team and to the organization overall.
Thank you for that, Mike.
Sure.
And I also love your attention to detail in terms of language and not using disempowering language, which is definitely a coach's thing to do. Yep. So instead of weaknesses, what are your opportunities for development?
Yep.
And then I also see here in the chat, conduct a self-assessment and identify gaps for growth.
And if your organization has a more formal way to do assessments, like 360-degree assessments or something objective, all the better. It helps you zero in and pinpoint on what those opportunities should be. If you don't have that, there are still ways to do that kind of self-assessment just by connecting with peers and your manager and getting feedback from them about what they see as your strengths, as well as your areas of opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good note also, because within organizations especially, these assessments tend to happen within a certain period of time on an annual basis. But I say, and you can both correct me here if you think differently or add additional perspective, assessment should be happening all the time. So you should be collecting data all the time. And even if your organization does not offer an assessment or it's just happening during a certain period of time, looking out and assessing your strengths and then also those areas for development constantly. So thank you. Andrea, how does your approach to leadership coaching change when dealing with clients from different sectors, such as corporate versus nonprofit?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I think one of the things that I've really learned throughout the course of my career and having worked in both industries is that really being aware of what resources are available to support individuals and professionals when it comes to having a goal setting conversation plays such a pivotal role, because too often we'll find ourselves setting these lofty goals without really considering what are the resources or taking assessment of the different forms of capital that are in place to either help or hinder us from achieving those goals. And so when we run up against some of those barriers, that level of anxiety or fear or disappointment perhaps gets even more intense because we didn't really think about all of these different factors. So that's certainly a key area whenever I'm coaching or advising leaders across my current organization or in other organizations, to really take inventory of what exists within the company. So that way we're painting a picture around goal setting that's practical, that's feasible, and that will help to mitigate some of those disappointments or surprises along the way for things that could have been considered on the front end of the goal setting. I think also another key thing that is extremely important when we think about goal setting across different industries is the organizational politics and the overall culture of those organizations that are at play. Sometimes it's a matter of really assessing what's the mission of the operational goals of the company for that fiscal year, right? Sometimes we set goals that may not necessarily align with the path that the organization is going on. And so when we go to submit those asks to the people team or to human resources to invest in some form of professional development or an initiative that we're looking to get off the ground, and we get a no, it's because we didn't take a step back to really understand what's most important for these leaders right now. Where do we see these big investments happening across the business? And now how can I be aware and mindful of that when I go to enter into a conversation around what my own personal or professional goals may be for this upcoming year? So it's super important that we're aware of what's happening across the organization around us, because regardless if you work for a company that you absolutely love and you get excited waking up every day to go into that job, or it's a company that you have identified as a point in time that's going to help sharpen some skills and prepare you for that next level of your career, regardless of which end of that spectrum you're on, it's so important that we're understanding how to play these different games of politics. So that way, when we think about what our goals are, especially as primarily marginalized communities or marginalized people, we know what's available to us. We know how to sell our business cases for being able to obtain these goals. And we can show that we're looking to create a win-win for both the organization as well as whatever our personal goals are for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I know that that question was framed more from coaching, maybe for organizations perspective, or even a consultant. But I love what Dr. Kyla dropped into the chat, because that's where my mind was going as well. That it's really important to also be aware and mindful of organizational goals, or even the temperature of the organization, your organization, what's possible, what's happening around, so that you can align your goals with the organization's goals as well. So for the both of you, and then we can start with Mike here, how important is mentorship in the process of setting and achieving goals, and how do you integrate it into your coaching practice?
So I would, another great question. I would start by saying that mentoring is useful whether you are in a coaching relationship or not. And I would hope that everyone on this call either currently has at least one mentor, if not more. And if he or she does not, that is already thinking about who you might like to approach as a mentor. Certainly in my career, I've had mentors all throughout, even today. They are an immensely valuable resource to tap into knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and so forth. So from a coaching perspective, I think a mentor lends a sort of a different and third-party ear and eye to what's happening with the individual. When I'm working with a coach, and I think this is generally how coaches work with their clients, we are focused on a specific framework or methodology. It's all about inquiry and asking questions, where the ultimate goal is to help the leader or the client self-discover, self-learn, self-decide, and ultimately self-apply. We are not about giving advice and giving direction. We may sort of ask really thoughtful and introspective questions to help people get to a point of discovery, but it's really about making sure that we are sort of providing the kind of environment where leaders can sort of discover their own opportunities, their own paths, and make their own decisions about how they're going to move forward. So I think coaches are obviously a valuable resource for anyone that's looking to develop. In contrast, I see mentoring as a little bit different. Certainly when I think of the mentors that I have worked with who have supported me, I see them as wise, sage individuals who have just great experience and I can go to for advice and sometimes direction. In fact, the best mentors I've had in my career are ones who have said, Mike, you might want to try this, or I think this will serve you better. So it's great to have mentors. If you don't have one now, I'd say definitely go out there and get one or more. You can have mentors within your organization. If you're doing that, I usually like to advise finding someone outside of your department, someone that could bring sort of a neutral and objective lens to whatever situation you're facing. I think most of my mentors have been outside of my organization. They bring even a different perspective. And the nice thing about having a couple of mentors or more is that you can combine multiple perspectives and look at issues and problems from really different angles and help you put things together in a nice way. When I have the luxury of working as a coach to someone who has one or more mentors, all the better, because I'm asking questions that allow the leader to self-discover, but they can also tap into their mentors to help them think through some of those issues and get some advice and direction on how they might proceed. So it's an ideal combination when I can find it, but both resources I think are great for anyone who's seriously looking to develop and grow in their professional career.
And if you can diversify what these mentors look like and where they come from, that is the goal as well. So create your team. And it looks like that mentorship from various different places should also complement a coaching relationship.
And if I add one more thing, one of the latest
Sure.
things that people are writing about is, and there's an article that says, I think the title is called "Forget Mentoring, Get Yourself a Board of Directors."
Yes.
And the concept,
Mhm.
the concept behind that is that, as you said, get multiple people from different background perspectives. Not that they're all coming together like a board traditionally does and meeting together, to help support you, but you're tapping into each of those different individuals because of the unique perspectives and experiences that they bring, and can provide you with lots of different ways to look at your situation. So the concept of personal board of directors is one that I think is growing with popularity as a great idea to tap into multiple levels of expertise.
Absolutely. And that's advice that I personally love to give, is to build your personal board of directors or personal board of advisors, but really just diversifying who you have on your team and who you can get advice from. But I want to hear what Andrea has to say. So how important is mentorship in the process of setting and achieving goals, and how do you integrate it into your coaching practice?
Mentoring is so invaluable, right? And I think one of the things that I have been encouraging more and more leaders, regardless of what level and state of your career that you're in, is to also consider not only those mentors who are 10, 15 plus years your senior within your respective industries, but consider getting a mentor who's 10 to 15 years your junior as well, depending on where you're at in your career. Because I can't stress enough how much I have learned from recent graduates, way more in tune with AI and all of these innovative things that are happening with technology to really help me reimagine the work that I'm doing. In addition to that, this younger generation is so much more vocal and matter of fact about activism and organizing. And so taking the essence and the spirit of what they're bringing to the workforce and now reimagining the DEI work and trends that we've historically been doing has been paramount to not only retaining them within the workforce, right, and keeping them engaged in the work, but also empowering them to step into these other opportunities that exist beyond their day-to-day job functions and responsibilities. So I think in addition to that, one of the ways that I got connected to C-suite coaches because of a reciprocal mentoring program that I launched at Warner Music Group. And I think something that's so critical when we have this conversation around why are mentors important, it's extremely important to be clear about what are your intentions within your mentoring relationship, right? So are you looking for a mentor for more situational guidance and advice? Are you looking for a mentor to help, with guidance around navigating company politics or organizational restructuring or skill set building? Why are you looking for a mentor? Right? We have to start getting clear on what exactly it is that we're looking to not only get out of a mentoring relationship, but also what are we willing to contribute to our mentor as well? Because we want it to start looking more reciprocal versus coming to the table and looking to just pull information. I think, one of the things that I really enjoy about the work that I've been doing with C-suite is that we're really pushing senior leaders to reevaluate some of these archaic practices that they've had in place for so long. When we think about how the workforce is changing, how we think about the work of DEI is evolving and looking a lot differently, and we're pushing beyond the 2020 DEI conversation. And so it's been really, really important for people to redefine what it means to have a mentoring relationship. And when we think about how does that show up in coaching conversations, right? As Mike mentioned, when we're coaching folks, we're not telling them what to do. We're asking them those deep and in-depth conversations to really reflect. And so by having a mentor, that gives you another lens, another set of experiences that have already happened. So that way, as our clients, or even for ourselves, as we're looking at what possibilities exist within our own goals or within our clients' goals, now they're able to consider, okay, well, my mentor actually took that path and this is where it led them to. I'm actually not quite interested in that. So what's another way for me to imagine this? What's another way for me to look at this? What's another path for me to consider? So then once I've come up with those potential options or opportunities, I can go to my mentor and talk through them. So I think, when it comes to the dynamics and the various ways that we can engage our mentors and our clients can engage their mentors, it's really, for me, it's really exciting to see how clients take stock of who they have in their board of directors, their top 5, whatever it is that they refer to their network as, and then really be able to see, how am I going to leverage this based on what are my intentions in this mentoring relationship that I have with them.
Who should you have on your board of directors, board of advisors, whatever you wish to call it? Who should we all have on this lineup, whether it be a top 5 or a top 7 or a top 10?
Let me reflect back on my own. So absolutely having a mentor and or mentors. Shout out to Miss Wanda Jackson, head of HR. She is one of my mentors and the HR leader for the National Urban League. Also, I think it's so important that everyone considers investing in a coach. I can't stress enough how invaluable it has been for myself to have one, but also working with a dynamic team of coaches through one of the programs at Warner. Also a sponsor. So that has just been paramount. And I have both peer sponsors in the community for that side of my world, as well as a professional sponsor. And my professional sponsor is actually someone from my previous job who continues to plug me for different opportunities and experiences, even though I no longer report to them or work with them. And then I think too, when we have a conversation around like around mentorship, think about your peers. Who else at your level or at your stage in your career is also grinding right now and aspiring to get to the next level in their career? Have that person a part of that top 5, because there's nothing like having someone to truly empathize with where you are, because they too are on a journey and they can really understand what current and present day factors are potentially getting in the way or what obstacles are coming up for you. So I think that's also really, really important. And then I may be going over 5 right now, but
we can have more than 5.
Listen, for me, I'm a woman of strong faith. And so my pastor is absolutely a part of that immediate tribe that I turn to. Because there is nothing like having a person who can help you and support you and encourage you to pray over your goals and pray over that journey to achieving your goals. So regardless of what that looks like, whatever religion or denomination, I think whoever or whatever you serve, it's important to have someone who shares that same sentiment to really encourage you throughout your journey.
Absolutely. And it's not one size fits all. So it could be a top 5 for one person and it could be a top 10. So boards don't all look the same. So ours also do not need to look the same. All right, awesome. So mentors, coaches. Also, I did not forget that you mentioned having younger people around you as well, because I learned so much from the younger people who I keep around. They keep me hip and digitally savvy. And then also what you need to balance that personal and professional. And that could mean, a pastor. All right, Mike, what do you have?
I want to ask a question to Andrea, though, because you touched on this, and I was going to talk about this as well, but I think it warrants a little bit more because it's so important. Could you say, Andrea, something about sponsorship? Because I think that's a term that not everyone knows and appreciates, certainly. We think mentors, yeah, I know what those guys, but sponsors are very, very different. And I think everyone on the call needs to understand the power of sponsors, the difficulty of getting good sponsors, but what sponsors also can do for you from a development perspective.
Absolutely.
So it's okay for me to ask that question. Then I'll share mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So sponsors are individuals or an individual who is going to advocate for your experience, your skills, your greatness, both when you're around, but more importantly, when you're not around. So when folks know what you're up to, they know what goals you're setting and what you're working towards achieving, when they become aware of opportunities that exist that align with what it is you're working towards, they're already submitting your name for this opportunity. They're already putting in that good word for you before your application, before your email, before your meeting even shows up in that person's calendar, because they believe in you. And more importantly, because they've seen the results that you've produced. So when we think about over time, right, how does this play into access to resources, to the point we made earlier about taking inventory of what exactly exists within your organization when you're setting goals? Having a strong sponsor in place is really important, because now they can give you a heads up on, when do these applications for these different training or development programs become available? What information should you start preparing in advance for these things? And again, they're already just plugging you for whatever it is that you're interested in. So should someone ask someone to be there, this is only from my personal experience. One of the ways that I was able to identify and establish a sponsor relationship with someone is because I had proven results of what I was capable of doing. Because the last thing you want, right, and we talk about this, and when you're identifying a mentor, you want to know someone before you need someone. And you also want someone to be able to speak with integrity on who you are and what you're capable of doing. And so I think it's important that as you're developing relationships with influencers and decision makers within your organization, ensure that you do have that positive and impactful track record to bring to that conversation, right? A lot of times people who have served as mentors eventually evolved into sponsors. So there's so many different organic ways that it could nurture and manifest itself into a sponsorship relationship. I think it's more so a matter of taking stock of, okay, who knows what I've been up to? Who has seen what I'm capable of? Who has benefited from the work that I have produced in my respective organization before even thinking about how do I ask someone to be my sponsor?
And just to add, I'll be very brief because I think you've done such an excellent job and you're covering that. But in addition to coach and sponsor, on my list of top 5, I would just add 3 others. One, I've been connected with someone who's an expert in the development profession and is always sort of bringing up current practices and best practices around how people develop, how they've grown, how they learn. So I try to stay in touch with those kind of individuals to help me be of good service to my clients. I have a particular person who I've been connected with who is a tech expert. I don't work in tech, but we live in a world where we need to understand technology. And so this person is able to help me understand different applications for technology. What does AI mean for people in the kind of work that they do? In fact, what we're seeing as a somewhat scary trend, I don't think it's going to ever replace the kind of coaching that we do, but there are AI-based coaching platforms out there where you're not speaking to a real life person, you're speaking to a chatbot. So I want to understand what's happening with that and how we can sort of position ourselves uniquely different from those kinds of resources, but also in what ways can technology help us be more effective and productive? And then finally, I have the leverage of having a live-in board of director member who is my spouse. And I will tell you, when I talked earlier about the importance of doing an honest and accurate self-assessment, your spouse will help you with that, right? I may think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but she will let me know exactly where I stand. And having that you might say biased, but certainly very objective advisor can be very, very helpful. Not to suggest that you all should go out there and find a spouse for that purpose, but if you have one, great. When you get one, leverage that spouse as a way to give you that honest feedback.
I love it. The only thing that I'll add here, you started referencing spouses, but even when you think about little league teams, for those of you who have children in your lives, even if it's a baseball team for 5-year-olds, they have multiple coaches. And I say that as high performers, as people working in our passions, whatever they may be within organizations, as independents, consultants, coaches ourselves, we also need a team of coaches, and it does not just have to be one, it can be multiple. And I love that we got into the conversation about having that board of advisor or board of directors, because we do need those perspectives. And just like we are also advocates for diversity, we want to also create that diversity of thought for ourselves. So thank you both. Andrea, you started and you mentioned your work in DEI. So how do you measure the success of DEI initiatives in relationship to organizational goals? And second part of that, which I'm very curious to hear, is what metrics do you find the most valuable when measuring success?
Yeah, so this is definitely an ongoing question and conversation that I think a lot of folks in the DEI space are having because the work is continuing to evolve. So depending on where an organization is at in their DEI story or journey, there are certain organizational metrics that hopefully, because I am learning that not all companies have these practices in place, right? But those consistent employee engagement surveys. So making sure that whether your DEI function is housed under HR or it's a separate function within the organization, because there are pros and cons to both, making sure that there are DEI specific and related questions that are a part of that engagement survey annually, because that's the only way we're really going to track if some of these initiatives and activities that are supposed to feed into those experiences for our employees are truly making a difference when people are responding to those questions. And you can see over time and track that against what programs, initiatives, policies, et cetera, were implemented year over year. Another key area that companies may or may not be comfortable with is formally collecting anecdotal feedback from your employees. So some companies may do pulse surveys halfway through the year to do temperature checks on what is the organizational culture saying, what are we doing right, what do we get to improve or shift throughout as we continue on throughout this year. Also, your employee resource group or business resource groups or affinity groups, whatever type of networks you have, are you surveying those members after your activities to really get a sense of, are we meeting their needs? Are we aligning with what it is that they're looking to get out of their experiences as employees? Same thing for me in learning and development, right? After every single learning program that we have, there is a post-workshop survey that goes out. Now, I know I'm saying a lot of survey. However, it's important that we're putting that information out there. Even if people aren't formally submitting their feedback in those surveys, they see that we genuinely do want to know what was their experience like completing it. And if they don't formally submit feedback, then at least they know who they can reach out to provide that anecdotal feedback. I think beyond that, some other areas that we can really start to look at other DEI related initiatives and having this conversation beyond personnel is supplier diversity. So at first, when I got into DEI a few years ago, this was definitely a more popular conversation amongst procurement teams. However, over the years, if I'm being honest, that conversation has lightened up a bit. And so when we think about these DEI related programs or strategies that are, launching or being refreshed within organizations, and you think about we're looking to invest in our workforce by creating mentoring or development programs. Are you looking at MWBE organizations like C-Suite to come in and provide those development services? Are you looking at local Black-owned or LGBTQIA+ or veteran-owned or any other category-owned businesses to come in and provide that product or that resource that the organization is looking to use for, whatever they're working towards? So these are just some of those core areas that I think over time can provide you with an accurate snapshot of just how meaningful and impactful your DEI work is. But of course, again, going back to my earlier sentiment, it really is contingent upon, how mature is the organization on their DEI journey. And then also the senior leadership buy-in. How serious are they about investing in DEI? Because this work is not free. In order to create these behavioral and cultural changes, it takes money when you want quality resources and products and services being poured into your organization. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation to get into on a different topic, but it's certainly something for folks who play in the space of DEI or have any level of influence in this work to really be thinking about, especially as we're going into a new calendar year.
So I do have a question for Mike and then a question for both. So Mike, what strategies do you recommend for professionals who are looking to enhance their executive presence as part of their personal goal setting? We did have someone in the chat mention personal branding earlier. year. So how would you answer this question?
First of all, I'm glad you asked that question. I know we had a chance to strategize on questions that would come up, and you always want to have more questions than you actually anticipated, but I was really hoping that one would come up. So, because that's been a big part of my coaching and also part of my own development. So a couple of things come to mind. I'll be brief so we can get Andrea back in and have some time for Q&A. First and foremost, you need to have a brand. What do I mean by that? You need to have a short, concise, yet very clear statement that reflects who you are and what you bring to the table. And how do you know that you've got a good brand? I think it's very easy. And we talked before about doing this sort of either quantitative or qualitative 360. Here's a simple way I like to think about it. If I say to myself, this is who I am, and then I ask you, Sandra, to go to, and I'm just going to pick some names on the screen, to go to Sherry, to go to Tatiana, to go to Andrea and say, how would you describe Mike? If those responses are consistently universal, that would say to me, I've got an accurate brand of who I am. So the starting point is to be very clear about, again, what are your strengths? How can you articulate that? And we talk about the elevator speech, right? You're in an elevator with a CEO, you're going up 20 floors, and you've got a minute or so to articulate what your brand is. Your brand, if it's a solid brand, should be one that not only is your own clear view of who you are and what you bring, but that is consistent with others who see you in the professional setting, and they say and observe and think the same things about you. When you are there, you've got a pretty good brand. So that's the first part of it, having that. And then secondly, it's about living that brand, putting yourselves in situations where you can demonstrate those strengths. And from a goal setting perspective, and again, we could debate on whether this is the right approach, but if you look at people who study strengths, they say, don't spend all of your time trying to shore up the gaps and work on those development opportunities. Granted, you need to do that, right? You need to get better at some things that are important. But if you leverage those strengths, if you can identify what your true strengths are and play to those more often from a goal setting perspective, yes, I'm good at communication, but I want to be masterful at that. Yes, I'm good at analysis, but I want to be a rock star in that area. Look for ways to really differentiate yourself, because that's, I think, the real key when it comes to career advancement. Look, everybody's got talent, right? But we know as we move up in organizations, there are just fewer spaces that are out there. So as we think about our brand, we need to think about how we can differentiate ourselves in a very crowded and competitive marketplace. And if that brand allows you to articulate those strengths in a way that's very clear and compelling, then you're in great shape. And so your goals ought to be, again, not only looking for areas where you can develop and grow, but how you can also leverage those strengths to actually push you to a higher level of visibility, get that brand statement out there more publicly. As Andrea said, get yourself visible enough so that the sponsors come looking for you and you not having to look for them. And being in a position where everybody is on the same page when asked the question, hey, how would you describe Mike?
Yeah, it looks like it happened at the same time, but Dr. Kyla dropped into the chat. So you need the personal branding and integrity to obtain a sponsor. What I would add to that is also you make your sponsor's job easier when you are consistent and when you are your brand and when you live your brand. And it also increases their confidence in being able to advocate for you. So this is for the both of you. And I do know that we have folks who are here who joined because we are approaching the end of the year. And people are reflecting on their goals, they're reflecting on where they are. And then when we enter the new year, people are definitely thinking about goal setting. And for those who might be considering coaching or mentorship, how do you help individuals align their personal values with their professional goals?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think, one of the things that's extremely important for me when I first engage in any coaching conversation or just working with people at Warner in general is really understanding what are their values. Because a lot of times we may say the things that really bring us joy, or we may know what they are. However, have we officially and formally identified them as being one of our core values? And that's important, right? Because a lot of times when we're working towards our goals and we come up against barriers or challenges and that frustrate us, that overwhelm us, we don't necessarily realize that there's some dissonance there, that whatever the circumstances that's in front of us is what's conflicting with our values. And so being very clear about that and making sure that even outside of our professional goals or whatever it is we're working towards, we have that healthy balance of other spaces that are going to help fill that cup and bring us that joy throughout the process of working towards our goals is extremely important. So really just making sure that my clients and my customers that I'm working with that within Warner understand what are their values, so that way they can be aware of when that disconnect or that harmony doesn't exist, and they can find other avenues within their lives to find that joy, to motivate them, to press that reset button for them, to be able to continue to push forward and not give up and not feel overwhelmed if the path isn't moving forward, in the manner in which they ideally set out for it. Another thing, as far as how values tie into the coaching relationship, is that oftentimes when our clients are experiencing those challenges, it's very difficult for them to move past that, to think of other possibilities that could exist within that challenge. And so by being very clear of what someone's values are, you get to ask them. So for me, connection and community is two of my top values. So it's like, what does this look like from a place of community? Oh, well, now that I think about it, this may be an opportunity for me to strengthen a relationship with this person that I may have fallen off with throughout the past couple of months of working with them. Or if something else is your value, how do you look at these things from that lens and from that place? And then it just opens up a whole nother array of possibilities and opportunities that perhaps weren't necessarily as clear to the client or as clear to my stakeholders prior to starting that conversation.
Clarity and intentionality. You've been very consistent in your responses around being clear and also going into these relationships and these scenarios with intentionality. And Mike, same question for you. How do you help individuals align their personal values with their professional goals?
I think Andrew's done a nice job. The only thing I would add to that is that over our lives, we really need to be sort of in tune with our values, because just as we change through different life experiences, we will probably see that our values change over time as well. So I think it's constantly important that we stay in touch with what those values are, how they have shifted. When you think of the fact that I've got a 25 and 22-year-old, 25-year-old son and 22-year-old daughter, values around family, although important for me 30 years ago, were different than they certainly are now. When those of you who have to look to a god-awful tuition payment that you have to endure, thank goodness we're done, you will begin to perhaps see that the value of education and money may shift over time as you have kids in those situations. So I always like to check in with people to make sure that they are, at the very least, no matter what organization they are in, to be in tune with those values and how those values may be shifting over time. And then, as Andrea said, it's about looking for those connection points between one's personal values and sort of the organization's values. If there is such thing as an ideal job, and I'm not sure it does exist, but certainly it's closer to that ideal state if there is perfect alignment, if there is such a thing, between one's personal values and the organization's values. If you can find that fit, then you're going to be more productive, you're going to be more engaged, you're going to get more stuff done, and ultimately you're going to be happy. But the only way you can do that is to constantly be in tune with what your values are and how they may shift over time.
Yes, and creating space for that shift as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ages and stages.
Yep. So you did a lot more concise than I did. Thank you.
And also, maybe tapping into a coaching or mentorship relationship to identify what those values may be and also how they may be shifting based on where you are in your life and how things are shifting in your life. So I think that's a great place to close. First, I want to start by saying thank you to both Andrea and to Mike. They're both trained as executive coaches and have worked or are currently working with large companies. And I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation around goal setting, why it matters, and also how to do it effectively, how to align with our organizations as well. And second, thank you to Angelina for partnership with the New York Urban League and with NYUL Connect, which we all invite you to join. For creating C-Suite Coach so we could see more of us at the C-Suite. Angelina, I will hand it over to you while I drop into the chat NYUL Connect. It is a free platform you can join. You can tap into NYUL Connect for mentorship and C-Suite Coach for coaching. So Angelina, over to you while I go ahead and multitask.
Yes, I echo everything that Sandra said. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, New York Urban League. Thank you to Andrea and Mike. Sometimes you need additional resources like training and executive coaching. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please do always feel free to reach out on our website, csuitecoach.com, and learn about our programs, both for you as an individual, but also for the organizations that we work with. And with that, thank you again, everyone, and have a great day. We'll see you next year with many C-Suite Coach chats.
Yes, we have a phenomenal lineup.